For 19 years, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban looked like one of Hollywood's most enduring couples. They built a family together. They stood beside each other through some of the hardest moments of their lives. And for years, they seemed to have found something rare in the celebrity world. A marriage that actually lasted. Then in 2025, that image began to disappear. Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban separated after nearly 2 decades together. And just months later, their marriage was officially over. Reuters, but the most heartbreaking part was not simply that they divorced. It was what the end of their marriage represented. Because this was not a relationship that appeared to collapse overnight. It was a love story that had survived addiction, fame, demanding careers, and years in the public eye. Keith had once spoken about how Nicole stood by him when his own struggles threatened to destroy his life. He even credited her with showing him what love in action really looked like. App News: So how did a couple who had survived so much finally reach the point where they could no longer stay together? What happened during those final months that the public never saw? And after 19 years of marriage, what was Nicole Kidman left with when the life she had built with Keith Urban suddenly became a life she had to rebuild without him? The answers are more complicated than a simple Hollywood breakup. Because sometimes the saddest ending is not when two people stop caring about each other. It is when love is no longer enough to keep two lives moving in the same direction. Before Keith Urban, Nicole Kidman had already experienced a very public marriage and divorce. She had been married to Tom Cruise for more than a decade. Their relationship ended in 2001. Nicole later said she spent years alone after that divorce, learning, growing, and trying to understand what came next. Then in January 2005, she met Keith Urban at the G-Day USA Gala in Los Angeles. Their connection moved quickly. By June 2006, they were married in Sydney. Nicole had found someone who seemed completely different from the life she had known before. Keith was a country music star. Nicole was one of Hollywood's biggest actresses. Their worlds were very different, but somehow they seemed to fit. And then came one of the most difficult moments of their marriage. Only 4 months after their wedding, Keith entered rehab for alcohol addiction. Nicole had staged an intervention because she was deeply concerned about him. Keith later described her intervention as a turning point in his life. That moment could have destroyed a young marriage. Instead, it became something they survived together. Keith continued his recovery. Nicole stood beside him. And over the years, they built a family of their own. Their daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, were born in 2008 and 2010. For years, the couple spoke publicly about their commitment to each other. Keith credited Nicole with changing his life. Nicole called Keith her deep love. In 2024, she even told people that she felt incredibly lucky to have him. That is what makes the ending so difficult to understand. This was not a marriage that began with an illusion of perfection. They had already faced something serious together. They had survived it. They built a family. They continued their careers. And for almost 2 decades, they kept choosing each other. So when the marriage finally began to unravel, the question was not simply why they fell apart. It was something much more painful. How does a relationship survive one of its darkest moments, only 2 years later? And by the summer of 2025, something inside their marriage had changed. Something the public could not see. But soon, the distance between Nicole and Keith would become impossible to hide. For years, there was little reason for the public to believe that Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban were heading toward divorce. They still spoke warmly about each other. They still appeared together in public. And in June 2025, they even marked their 19th wedding anniversary. But behind that familiar image, their lives were beginning to move in different directions. Keith was focused on his music career and touring. Nicole was deeply involved in her own work, including filming Practical Magic 2 in London. Their schedules were demanding, And gradually, the distance between them became more than physical. By the beginning of summer 2025, reports said they were living separately. Keith had moved into his own place in Nashville. That detail became one of the clearest signs that something serious had changed. Then came a moment that seemed small at the time. In July, Keith abruptly ended a radio interview after being asked about one of Nicole's movie roles. The moment quickly spread online. People began looking for clues. Was there tension between them? Was the marriage already in trouble? Or was the public simply reading too much into one uncomfortable moment? The truth is, we still do not know exactly what happened behind closed doors. And that uncertainty matters. Because once the divorce became public, competing reports began appearing everywhere. Some sources claimed the couple had been drifting apart for some time. Others suggested Nicole had wanted to save the marriage. But those details came largely from unnamed sources, not from Nicole or Keith themselves. What we do know is what happened next. On September 30, 2025, Nicole filed for divorce in Nashville. Their official filing cited irreconcilable differences. After 19 years of marriage, the relationship that had once seemed so permanent was entering its final chapter. And suddenly, every photograph from the previous few years looked different. Every anniversary, every red carpet appearance, every public declaration of love. The audience began looking at all of it through one painful question. When did they stop being the couple everyone thought they were? Perhaps the most heartbreaking answer is that there may never be one single moment. Sometimes a marriage does not end with one dramatic event. Sometimes two people simply reach a point where their lives are no longer moving in the same direction. And for Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban, that realization would soon become permanent. On September 30, 2025, the ending became official. Nicole Kidman filed for divorce from Keith Urban in a Nashville court after 19 years of marriage. The legal documents cited marital difficulties and irreconcilable differences. There was no dramatic public confrontation, no explosive announcement from either star. Just a court filing that suddenly turned nearly 2 decades of marriage into the past. But behind that filing was a family that had spent years building a life together. Nicole and Keith shared 2 daughters. And their divorce was not simply about separating 2 celebrities. It meant creating a completely different family structure. The court documents showed that Nicole would become the primary residential parent, while both parents would continue sharing responsibility for major decisions involving their daughters. Then on January 6, 2026, the divorce was officially finalized. 19 years of marriage were legally over. But one thing was clear. Their relationship as parents was not over. Their agreement emphasized stability for their daughters and required both parents to maintain a loving and supportive relationship with them. And perhaps the most revealing part came from Nicole herself. After the divorce, she did not publicly attack Keith. She did not explain every private detail. Instead, she focused on her family. In a later interview, Nicole said she was moving toward what was good and was grateful for her family. She also made it clear that there were certain things she would not discuss, out of respect. That silence leaves many questions unanswered. What actually caused the marriage to end? Could it have been saved? And when did the 2 people who once seemed inseparable realize that their lives were moving in different directions? We may never know the complete answer. And perhaps that is the hardest part of this story. Because the public wants a simple explanation. A villain. A shocking secret. One final moment that explains everything. But real marriages are rarely that simple. Sometimes the ending happens slowly. Sometimes 2 people can love each other and still reach a point where staying together no longer works. And sometimes the final goodbye is not one dramatic moment. It is a series of quiet decisions. Until one day, the relationship that once felt permanent is simply over. For Nicole Kidman, That meant facing a future she once never imagined. A future without Keith Urban as her husband. But it did not mean the end of her life. In fact, it may have marked the beginning of something completely different. For Nicole Kidman, the hardest part may not have been signing the divorce papers. It may have been accepting that the future she once imagined was gone. After 19 years with Keith Urban, Nicole suddenly had to look at her life differently. She had made plans. She had built a family. She had imagined growing older with the man she married in 2006. And then, unexpectedly, that future changed. In a new interview with British Vogue, Nicole admitted that the past year had been difficult. She said she had imagined her life turning out differently. But life does not always follow the plans we make. And now she says she has had to adjust. She has had to adapt. And perhaps most importantly, she has had to face a future that she cannot predict. There was a moment when she admitted feeling deeply vulnerable. Even afraid. But instead of allowing that fear to define her, Nicole chose another direction. Hope. She described moving forward with an enormous amount of hope, even while knowing that the future was completely unknown. That may be the most revealing thing Nicole has said since the divorce. She is not pretending that everything is fine. She is not pretending that losing a 19-year marriage was easy. But she also does not appear to be allowing the ending to become the definition of her life. And that attitude is visible in the way she is living now. She continues to work. She continues to travel. She continues to spend time with her daughters. And she appears determined to rediscover parts of herself that may have been buried beneath years of marriage, motherhood, and an extraordinary career. In the summer of 2026, Nicole was traveling through Europe, visiting places including London, Paris, Portofino, and Ibiza. She even revealed that she sometimes wears glasses or a dark wig so she can go dancing without being recognized. That detail might seem trivial, but perhaps it says something deeper. Nicole Kidman has spent almost her entire life being watched. Now she seems to be searching for moments when she can simply be Nicole. Not an Oscar-winning actress. Not Keith Urban's wife. Not one half of a famous Hollywood marriage. Just a woman dancing among strangers. A woman laughing with friends. A woman trying to enjoy life again. And there is another reason this chapter matters. Nicole has experienced heartbreak before. Her marriage to Tom Cruise ended in 2000, and one after more than a decade together. Yet when asked whether that earlier divorce prepared her for this one, she gave a simple answer. Every time is new. Because heartbreak does not become easier simply because you have experienced it before. That may be the real truth about Nicole Kidman's life after Keith Urban. She is not trying to erase the past. She is learning how to live beyond it. And somewhere between the fear and the uncertainty, she appears to have discovered something important. The end of one chapter does not mean the end of the story. But there is still one question left. After 19 years together, what really happened between Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban? And why did a marriage that survived so much finally reach its final goodbye? Maybe the hardest truth about Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban is that there may never be one simple explanation for why their marriage ended. The public wants a reason. One mistake. One betrayal. One final argument. Something that can explain how 19 years of marriage came to an end. But the facts tell a quieter story. Nicole filed for divorce in September 2025. The divorce was finalized in January 2026. And their parenting agreement made clear that, whatever happened between them as a couple, they still had 2 daughters to raise together. Then came Nicole's first major reflection on what happened. In her August 2026 British Vogue interview, she admitted something that completely changed the way the story looked. She said she had not expected this. She had imagined her life differently. She had made plans. She had pictured a future. And suddenly, that future no longer existed. Nicole said she had to adjust. She had to adapt. And she admitted that the future now feels completely unknown to her. That may be the closest thing we have to an answer. Not a scandal, not a dramatic confession, but the realization that life had taken two people somewhere neither of them expected. Nicole also revealed that there was a period when she felt deeply vulnerable and afraid. She had a choice. She could retreat from the pain, or she could move forward with hope. She chose hope, and that decision seems to define Nicole's life now. She is working. She is traveling. She is spending time with her daughters. She is dancing. She is laughing. She is finding small moments where she can simply be herself. In fact, Nicole recently revealed that she sometimes wears glasses or a dark wig when she goes dancing, just so she can disappear into the crowd. For a woman who has spent decades being recognized everywhere she goes, that freedom appears to mean something to her. And perhaps there is something symbolic about that. For 19 years, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban were known as a couple. Now Nicole is learning how to exist as Nicole. Not someone's wife. Not half of a celebrity marriage. Not a woman defined by the way her relationship ended. Just herself. And maybe that is where the real story ends. Not with Keith Urban as the villain. Not with Nicole Kidman as the victim. But with two people whose lives once moved together and eventually moved apart. Their love story was real. Their family was real. Their happiness was real. And the ending was real too. Sometimes a relationship can survive fame. It can survive addiction. It can survive years of pressure. And still reach a point where two people have to accept that their future will look different. That does not make everything that came before meaningless. It simply means that some chapters are not meant to last forever. Nicole Kidman once imagined growing older with Keith Urban. Now she is facing a future she never planned. And perhaps the most powerful thing she can do is exactly what she says she is doing. Adjust, adapt, and keep moving forward with hope. Because the final goodbye may have ended their marriage. But it does not have to end Nicole Kidman's story.